Russia, the largest country in the world, and the most popular way to cross it, by rail. Rubbing shoulders with locals from the present and the past, crossing 7 time zones through the Siberian winter, from western opulence to eastern modesty, and everything in between.
Welcome to Siberia. Welcome to one of the coldest climates in the world. I've arrived here from Europe across to Asia on the longest train journey in the world. This is Out of Curiosity, and this is the Trans-Siberian Railroad.
The main route runs from Moscow in the west, past the river Volga and the Urals, and into the Russian Far East. There's a gradual shift of landscapes, cultures and ethnicity as the train passes borders with Kazakhstan, Mongolia and China, where the tracks end at Vladivostok, after a solid 6 to 7 days of travel. So, who actually uses the train? Well, not many tourists, I can tell you. The Trans-Siberian connection is used mainly by locals crossing the vast country. The people I spoke to were going to visit family, coming or going for work, and every young Russian will get a taste of the journey coming back as men from military service. If you plan to stop off along the way, you will have to buy multiple tickets, which are very affordable for a second-class bunk and even quite cheap for the more boisterous and entertaining third class. This option definitely the most memorable. Every carriage will have a restaurant wagon serving meals and alcohol, also very memorable. Your Russian visa and tickets will be checked every time you enter a train by the carriage attendant, the Provodnitsa. So why take the journey at all? Well, for many travellers it carries a certain mystique. This idea of a forced solitude, locked away in a cabin, lazily passing through the Siberian landscape with only your literature and your thoughts for company. As a solo traveller without much Russian, the journey was not all plain sailing. Having to work through language barriers and fighting off fleeting sentiments of restlessness and claustrophobia. Travel is always full of challenges to overcome. Sure, that's why we do it. Every journey needs a starting point. This one begins in St. Petersburg. Formerly Petrograd and then Leningrad, St. Petersburg is the northernmost metropolis in the world, and a perfect place to begin or end the Trans-Siberian journey. Established by Peter the Great to solidify ties between the Russian Empire and Europe, those links are still clear in the city today. It's considered the most European part of Russia. St. Petersburg is also the cultural centre of the country, and it's plainly obvious when you go deep underground to find an intricately connected collection of museum halls, also known as the St. Petersburg metro system. The most beautiful underground in the world. There's decorative marble pillars and walls at every station. Murals and statues on every corner dedicated to the great Russians of the past. There's probably a string quartet offering out caviar at the turnstiles. You can see why Russians are so proud of this place. The State Hermitage Museum, the second largest museum in the whole world. A gargantuan complex on the banks of the river Neva. It's quite common to even get lost inside. And most people will take a few trips here in an attempt to see the 3 million items on display, dating from the Stone Age to the present day. A must-see while in St. Petersburg. It's one of the great canal cities of the world also. The waterways and their bridges dominate the centre of the city and create a very salubrious atmosphere. It's a place you visit for a few days and you want to stay for a year. All roads lead to Moscow. A 4-hour bullet train takes you to the capital. First steps into the city and you're surrounded by an imposing skyline. It's a pretty exciting place with so much going on and just a few days here. I used the time to soak up the big city energy for the long journey ahead. It's a big, big place, but as many of the locals will say, big does not always mean beautiful, when they are referring to the colossal statue of Peter the Great, who famously disliked Moscow and even moved the capital to St. Petersburg. Many of the locals dislike the statue, and there's even talk of taking it down from the Moscow skyline. Russian culture can be quite superstitious, so many of the life-size statues in the country will be rubbed for good luck. Public transport is really cheap all over Russia. Definitely the best way to get a feel for the city. The changing of the guard at the Kremlin is impressive, with respects shown to the 25 million people lost during World War II. And just around the corner is Red Square, the centre of the city, the focal point of the whole country. This is where St. Basil's Cathedral has faced out onto the coronation of Tsars and Soviet military parades. Inside the walls of the Moscow Kremlin is where the country is run from, with pristine palaces and cathedrals spread throughout the massive complex. It's a very affordable place, with a few cool art districts and outdoor spaces like Gorky Park. Awesome riverside views and a classy vibe to the city. I left the place lamenting my visa wasn't longer. For my first stop on the Trans-Siberian Railroad, I decided to take a detour a few hours outside of Moscow to a little piece of history in Suzdal. You can take a communal taxi from the town of Vladimir. As you begin to get a sense of what the rest of Russia might look like, that's right up until you reach Suzdal, an untouched piece of the past. Once a royal capital that even Moscow answered to. As Russia was planning its Trans-Siberian Railway to connect Europe to Asia in the late 19th century, the route bypassed Suzdal, as did the 20th century, leaving this town unspoiled by pragmatist Soviet architecture. The traditional Russian houses, the monasteries, and the Kremlin all resemble that of an old Russian fairy tale. Rejoining the main routes, it was time to start heading east, over the Ural Mountains and officially into Asia. After the early morning dip with my couchsurfing hosts, it's time to visit the town centre of Nizhny Novgorod. There's a bustling town centre with yet another Kremlin, one of 20 throughout the whole country. You can walk along these citadel walls to a viewpoint of Europe's longest river, the Volga, that runs north of Moscow to the border with Kazakhstan of the Caspian Sea. Perm was more what I expected to see across Russia, full of Soviet architecture built for purpose rather than for aesthetics, though a splash of colour has been added in recent times. Perm was a closed city for much of the time of the Soviet Union due to its proximity to Perm 36, a gulag 100 kilometers away. It's one of the only remaining labour camp memorials open to the public across all of Russia. Yekaterinburg, the fourth largest city in the country and once known as Russia's gateway to Asia. The recent economic boom has led to the appearance of skyscrapers and a sharp rise in population. It's famously where the last royal family of Russia were murdered in 1918, where Boris Yeltsin earned his stripes here before becoming Russia's first president. And it's the town of Russia's answer to Bob Dylan, Vladimir Vysotsky, who provided the soundtrack to a disillusioned generation of the Soviet Union. These past few stops were not the most revolutionary of the journey. They served well in breaking up the long trip, but you somehow feel the best is yet to come.
Да не все то, что сверху от Бога, и народ зажигалки душил, и как малая фронту подмога, мой песок и дырявый кувшин, и било солнце в 3 луча сквозь дыры крыш просеяно, да Евдоким Кирилловича иди.
Any journey on the Trans-Siberian Railway could be from 6 hours to 6 days. So you're going to have to pass the time somehow. The third-class bunks often transform into picnic parties when the locals will stuff you with tea, vodka and sandwiches to hear your story. You can walk the length of the train to stretch your legs. Just beware the doors between carriages can be frozen stiff in the winter. You're going to sleep a lot and you're going to read a lot. So bring all of the books you have yet to tick off your list. Vending machines on board also sell some mediocre foods, so get used to instant noodles. Otherwise, you can head to the restaurant wagon for some hot food. And this is a guaranteed place to find a drinking buddy, day or night. But the best entertainment of all is outside the window, in the passing Siberian landscape.
Would you take me as I am and long to be, with my feathers to the wind and flying free, out of darkness to the light of day? Some have fallen, some have blown astray. Tell me how the story ends. Just let me read. Lost and found and lost again down one-way streets. Voices calling out from
Episode 2 takes us deeper into Siberia and another detour north of Tyumen, this time to the region's most historic city, Tobolsk. The centerpiece of the town is of course another Kremlin, this stone-walled citadel probably the most eye-catching of them all, sitting perched high above the old town. And from the bell tower, views of the Siberian landscape that will repeat from here to the Arctic Ocean. Famous sons include Dmitry Mendeleev, who formulated the periodic table, and the town prison that held Dostoevsky captive on his way to exile further east. There is a medieval beer hall next to the Kremlin, but for some reason the footage of it is a bit messy for this documentary. It's a town with very tangible layers of the history of Russia, one of the best memories of the journey. The Trans-Siberian trains run on a pretty strict timetable. There's a scheduled amount of time at each stop, sometimes 5 minutes, sometimes 50, and believe me, you will want to get out whenever you can. Anything over 20 hours on the train and you'll be craving the fresh air. Make sure to ask the Provodnitsa how long the train is stopping for. If you come back even a few minutes late, the train will have left with all your stuff. And definitely make a note of the track your train is on, because all the trains look the same. If it's just a short stop, you could get off quickly for a souvenir or a snack and watch the activity along the track. It's usually full of people smoking in their pajamas. If you've got a bit more time, you can stretch your legs around the station and take in the views of the Siberian architecture. Most will head indoors to the bistro to find pirozhki or treat themselves to Russian pancakes, two foods not to be missed. Travelling across Siberia in winter is not the most popular time to do so, but it is the most authentic. Temperatures in early winter range from -10 to -30, and it only gets colder after that. It is quite the challenge even just doing the basics. I found it quite difficult to film for more than 30 seconds before my hands went numb. You'll find yourself ducking into cafes to escape the cold. The best thing to do is just copy the locals. Take things slow and wrap up well. Travelling the Trans-Siberian in winter will bring its rewards. Everything is cheaper in the off-season, you beat the crowds, and there's a certain beauty to winter, unlike any other season. As well as all of that, it's real, it's authentic. We have to remember where we are and what this place is famous for. I mean, what comes to mind when you hear the word Siberia? Before my Russian visa ran out, there was still time to visit the capital of Siberia, Novosibirsk, and to set up base camp in Irkutsk for expeditions to the Pearl of Siberia, Lake Baikal. Russia's third largest city with a population of 1.6 million, Novosibirsk feels much calmer than its capital of Siberia title would suggest. The centre is compact and full of green spaces for a stroll, as well as Russian and Georgian cuisine, just to forget those instant noodles for at least a while. The theatre and the ballet are always an option in Russian cities, as well as one of these, a god-awful Irish pub, serving probably the worst pint of Guinness this side of the Ural Mountains. No Luke Kelly or Christy Moore in this neck of the woods, just some traditional Irish, Slavic heavy metal. Jesus. The most popular stop on the Trans-Siberian Railroad is Irkutsk. Just 70 kilometers from the deepest lake in the world, Lake Baikal, the town will be your home for this part of the journey. For many travelers heading south to Mongolia or China like myself, this will be the last stop on the journey. And for people doing the trip in the opposite direction, it will be their first stop in Russia. So be sure to pass your wisdom onto them. Day trips by train to Baikal take you through the mountainous region surrounding the lake's western shores. Alighting at Sludyanka, you'll find yourself in a gritty railway town that will appeal to only the most ardent of train lovers. The train passes just along beside the shore of the lake, and in the high season there's hiking and guided tours to some abandoned mines, but in general, not much going on here. The more tourist-friendly Listyanka has a lot more going on, fish restaurants and markets lining the shore. But once again, I found myself caught between two seasons. The jet skiing and diving of the summer were long finished, and the ice skating and lake trekking on top of the thick ice still a few weeks away. At the time on this trip, I longed for the high season. Halfway up the 636 kilometre long shoreline in the middle of the lake is Olkhon Island. An early start and a 5-hour minibus takes you to what seems like another world. Kuzhir is a cosy one-horse town with about 1,500 people, and hard to believe this is still Russia. Dirt roads and darkness dominate the streets and make Moscow feel like a distant memory. Along the coast of Kuzhir, the signs of winter were beginning to appear. It's amazing that it's actually just so quiet around here. Being beside such a large body of water, you would kind of expect crashing waves to be smacking up against the shore, but it's really quite serene. And it's hard to believe that this is going to be completely full of solid ice in just a number of weeks. These ritual surge poles signify the presence of a shaman on Olkhon Island. The serenity and spiritual energy make it a sacred place for shamanism, the religion of the local Buryat tribe of the island. By far the best way to see the island is with the local Buryats. For a fair price, they will take you around for a day in a classic Soviet UAZ minivan. This was not one of the newest models, so it did not come with seatbelts, which made for a fairly bumpy ride. All things considered, it didn't matter all that much. These cliffs and waters are at least 25 million years old, making it the world's oldest lake and one of the clearest. At times you can see seals swimming 40 meters below the surface. If you were to fall in from here, you'd be sinking for 1.5 kilometers before you hit the bottom. So it's the world's deepest lake as well.
Мчатся барашки в ней, волна в их стаде бежит непокорным туда, где между крыш вода клонит камыш.
This serene and peaceful island marks the end of this Trans-Siberian journey. A month was definitely not long enough to go deeper under the skin of Russia. It's a diverse and complicated place, from west to east, where histories collide and the many different Russias are revealed along the way. No two journeys are ever the same. This is just another story from the Trans-Siberian Railway.